Well, I finally did it. I finished Shadow of the Erdtree, and I'm going to give you my thoughts on this DLC for one of the best action RPGs that there is out there. I'm going to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly. This is Game Crunch. Now, let's talk about it. Now, quick, I just wanted to say before we start that I really wanted to stream my playthrough of this game, but I ended up being glad that I didn't. It just requires too much of my focus, and the other thing was my choice of words when I die would likely have got my channel shut down. So, anyways, that's why I didn't stream it. But let's get into it. Elden Ring. I sank about 150 hours into this game when it launched. I played through 3 times on my main character. So I guess that's what, NG plus, or is that NG plus plus? I don't know. Souls fans, you have to tell me. I have to say though, my first playthrough of this game was a slog. I just remember dying all the time. But Elden Ring overall felt more fair. It didn't feel like it was designed with so much of the purpose just to frustrate the player as Souls games that I played previously. But for my second and third playthrough, I used a pretty good vampire bleed build. It was the double katanas, the long ones. I forget what they're called. I think it's like Naga Kiba or something like that. And built with stuff that all increases like your damage on successive hits and with blood loss. And then I used the Godskin cloth and other stuff to heal me kind of as I killed enemies and as I deal damage. So my second and third playthroughs, I ran absolute train on this game. It was like easy mode. It did feel really good though when I went back through the game and then just absolutely destroying all those bosses that gave me frustrations on my first playthrough and then just absolutely decimating them. Felt so good. But we're not here to talk about my Elden Ring base game playthrough. I just kind of wanted to, I guess, set the stage for the build that I used for the DLC because I did continue kind of with that blood vampire build. I was at about level 280, I want to say, around there to start. I was very high, and I did one more playthrough. So what's that, NG plus 3 or something? I don't know. Just to refamiliarize myself with the game before diving into Shadow of the Erdtree. So I think that may have also added some difficulty to my playthrough. Maybe let me know down below if that actually works that way. But stick around for the bad and ugly. But first, let's get into the good stuff because there was a lot of good stuff here in this DLC. The open world obviously is gorgeous. Some of the views you get are crazy, stunning, and then having that Erdtree kind of like almost like looming over you in the back with the castles and the landscape and the sky. It's just beautiful in so many zones, and it really brings back the feelings of the first time stepping out into the world in the base game of Elden Ring. Kind of gives you that same like Breath of the Wild moment of shock and awe. You're like, oh, you know what I mean? But something I always love about the Souls games as well is the boss design. Some of these guys look so freaking cool. Like from the dancing lion, that was super creative. I really like that boss. Mesmer's snake looked really cool. Midra, the frenzied flame or whatever he's called. That scene where he's kind of got the sword in his head and he's taking it out and is shaking and everything, so cool. And even some more of like the lower level enemies and stuff are really cool looking, and they all kind of have that like edginess to them. And then you've got some of the fights that were pretty fun. I actually really liked that dancing fight. I thought it was pretty cool. And some of the enemies as well are pretty cool. Like, I mean, in this expansion, you've got a few reused ones. Like, oh god, the one I could think of off the top of my head is those stupid bug things, and they shoot the stupid things at you. I hate those things. And I guess the exploration as well is pretty well done. They do a good job of highlighting places. This is kind of what I wanted to say. Where you should go without really telling you. So they don't straight up tell you, but you can kind of like see things, like a castle or whatever that in the distance, and maybe some like mountains and some whatever other areas. So you kind of have like an idea of maybe I'll go there, I'll check that out, I'll check this out, without actually like fully telling you. And then there's that big flame torch guy, kind of when you walk into the actual world. And I was feeling myself, and he quickly humbled me. The other thing, dungeon designs I think were actually pretty well done, and Elden Ring in general did this pretty well, where it didn't feel like you were going too long between checkpoints. Like it kind of felt that way the first time I played the first Dark Souls, or there would be a doorway or a passage or something you would open. So it wouldn't be such a slog to get back to where you died, because then you'd have that kind of like shortcut to get back to where you were. The combat as well. I mean, it's Souls combat. It's the same as Elden Ring. Nothing really changed, so I can't really say much about that. I'm not like the biggest fan of that sort of Souls-like combat in general, but the game overall still carries its weight beyond that, and makes me forget at times that I'm actually, in fact, playing a Souls game. And if you've made it this far, you're awesome. I'm just going to give you a little digital kind of pat on the back, and we're going to get into the bad and the ugly, because that's likely why you clicked this video in the first place, isn't it? You probably came for the controversy. You're here for the drama, and what you're really here for is waiting for me to say this game is too hard, so that way you could tell me to get good or whatever. I'm on to you. Don't think you can fool me. The least you could do, actually, though, before you trash me down in the comments, give the video a like if you like the video, and if you like it so far, I mean, maybe even hit the subscribe button, so that way you can comment "get good" on my next video as well. So I'm giving you guys that free opportunity. Don't miss that opportunity. Don't squander that opportunity. But let's talk about the bad. Now, when I say good, bad, ugly, some of these bad things might not even be too bad. It's really what I kind of tried to characterize this was as just something for my personal player preference, not so much that maybe it was bad. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is the open world itself. I don't see many people mention this, but the open world actually did frustrate me quite a bit. Now, the base game struggled with this a little bit, and maybe that's just coming off of like Breath of the Wild and having everything just straight up open for the most part. But the base game was pretty open. In Shadow of the Erdtree, though, I really felt like it was very walled off. There was huge cliffs everywhere. It's either you couldn't climb them or you couldn't drop down. So it made trying to figure out how to get around in Shadow of the Erdtree very difficult at times. And I just could not figure out how to get to different zones, learning later that it was like some obscure path like somewhere else far on the map. And sometimes I would just get sick of looking at how to get there, and I would just Google it. And I ended up calling games like the Souls games Google games a lot, because they do very little to explain anything, and everything is so cryptic, and I find myself Googling stuff all the time after I've spent hours trying to figure it out on my own, only to learn that I probably would have never actually figured it out anyway. Like one example was having to use the "Oh Mother" emote to get through a secret wall to get to that part that's kind of like in the most northeastern area, if you know what I'm talking about. I would have never figured that out in a million years. And I'm sure that, I mean, there's probably some clue buried deep somewhere in the game that I've completely missed it. But I mean, how am I supposed to find that? But I mean, I guess that kind of segues into the next thing, which is really like the story. Now, I know Souls games try to keep the story secondary and gameplay first, and I actually really applaud that. I think that is excellent. But after 4 playthroughs, I still don't really know what's happening or what this game is about fully. And oh, I know some of you guys sitting there are going to be triggered right now, but wait, there's more. So don't get too triggered just yet. The weapons and some of the upgrades, I mean, is it me, or does it just feel like every piece of armor and every weapon in this game kind of just feels like a cosmetic? I get all these cool armor sets, and none of it's really any better or any worse than stuff I previously had from my original playthrough. I ended up mostly just using the same armor I had before. So I found myself not really caring to explore some of those zones or pick stuff up, because it was just more stuff that I would never use anyway. More somber stones, more smithing stones, more materials for crafting that I'm never going to use. I mean, the new heavy poise set's pretty nice. I did use some of that. And I mean, it didn't really make much of a difference still, but I guess it looks good on the stat sheet. I've got more poise. Okay, sure. I mean, boss is still 2, 3 shot you even in the hardest, biggest gear. But without saying too much about that yet, let's talk about the ugly. And I've got about 3 points of contention, I think, here. After praising the game for how beautiful it looks, I played on the PS5, and my God, the amount of pop in is actually distracting in the open world sometimes. Literally, specifically in areas with heavy grass, it would kind of look like in front of you that someone like mowed the grass in front of you, like 20 feet ahead of you, until you kind of like loads in, which I found very distracting. Other open world games on the same hardware didn't struggle this bad, like Dragon's Dogma 2. Horizon Forbidden West had like almost no pop in except way out there. Ghost of Tsushima, which was actually a PS4 game, just to name a few, they didn't have this sort of pop in. I'm sure on quality mode it probably would have been a little bit better, but let's be honest, you can't play this game on quality. Let's be real. The next ugly thing I would say would be the upgrade system. Now, while I get and I think I understand why they did it the way they did it, likely having more weapon upgrades and stronger weapons and armor and more meaningful leveling upgrades probably would have thrown PvP for a loop and made anything from the base game, I guess, more obsolete. So I kind of understand where they're coming from. But the Tree upgrades, to me, they just felt like kind of cheap and lazy. I don't know. I don't really have a good solution here for what I would have done differently to improved it. Like the only thing top of my head, like maybe adjusted the leveling soft caps to make it worth putting points into skills like past 50. You know how like pretty hard caps after 50, like change it, but only in the shadow realm. I'm not too sure, but nothing really felt good about doing this Easter egg hunt to get Tree fragments just to be able to compete against some of these bosses. Now, I'm sure you've guessed these bosses. You probably knew this was coming, didn't you? um, Here we go. Start typing your insults down below. Get ready to smash that enter button because you kind of know what's coming here. I told you, you know what you're up to on the other side of the screen there. I'm up. I know what you guys are up to over there. But in all realness, I thought some of these fights were actually pretty great and pretty cool. Like the dancing lion, I actually one shot it, and I did not feel like that one was too unfair. He hit hard, but he also kind of let me play the game, which is kind of my point of contention. Romana, Saint of the Bud. Honestly, that one could be buffed. I one shot that as well. That one was kind of like the only real joke of a boss fight. Um, and there's nothing really wrong, in my opinion, with having some of those varying levels, to kind of give yourself like a bit of a break. You kind of steamrolled that boss and felt good about it. And I actually didn't find Matir, I think it is, the finger one, so I might have to go back to that boss. I think that's the only one I might have missed. But the bosses I struggled with personally were Bale, Putrescent, the Putrescent Knight, and Rodan, of course. Mesmer was tough, honestly, but it wasn't that bad. And Twin Moon Knight, as well as others, I'd say they were tough, but I two-shot that one, and not sure. It didn't seem too bad to me, but either easier or harder, they all seem to share one common trait, which is where I really get into the ugly bits on this. Their difficulty really stemmed from the fact that they don't stop swinging at you. Literally, you walk through the fog and they're bum rushing you right away. There's no time to set up. So many times I would just die just trying to get my spirit out at the beginning of the fight. Like I literally couldn't do anything. In the base game, all the bosses in the base game, they always have that, slow, menacing walk towards you. And then you've kind of got like a few seconds, you can kind of summon your spirit. You're kind of sitting there like, oh shit, summon your spirit, pop your fast, compose yourself, maybe use a consumable. And it added like almost like a level of drama too. It's almost like punching your opponent before the bell rings. It was brutal. And then Rodan, he was the worst for this. They just don't quit attacking. It's a constant barrage of attacks. So trying to heal or trying to get a single hit in, honestly, is just comical. I would just laugh at the game. I'd be like, what the hell is this? I've never experienced anything like this in a Souls-like. Typically, like in your normal bosses, you've got they do a big combo, they do a bunch of swings, and then maybe they do a little change up to kind of throw you off, and you do your little blocks, and you do your little rolls, and you do your little parries, and then you've got kind of like a second as the boss like regains their composure to get a few hits in or heal up if needed. No, Rodon says just like fuck all that, fuck you, fuck all your healing, and then as I mentioned earlier, you pop your golden vow, you have the highest armor in the game, you use your defensive trinkets. It doesn't matter. He still three shots you anyway. So when you've got this constant barrage of like bullshit coming at you, it gets exhausting, honestly. And I get highly uninterested in the game when you're just like getting steamrolled like that over and over before you can actually even play the game. It just feels like cheap tactics to kill you over and over again, to make the game what I like to call as artificially hard. Think of it this way: is it hard to get hit by a train when you're tied to the tracks? No, you're tied to the damn tracks. What are you supposed to do? Nothing. There's nothing you can do. So when I come up to bosses like Rodon, and I'll be real, he was the most frustrating boss I think I've ever played in a Souls game. But what I'll do is, honestly, I'll just fight cheese with cheese. So what I did, and I did this before looking up guides, I just kind of got this idea, but I put a shield on, and I let my mimic do all the damage. Because I literally couldn't hit him without trading damage. Every time I went to swing, it would be a trade. I'd take half my health, and he'd take a tiny little bit. And to me, that just doesn't feel good. I don't feel good when I beat a boss like this either, when I have to use cheesy tactics. It just feels like it came down to luck. A lot of the bosses came down to this. Like, did he just use a lot of his sword swings this attempt? Or did he do all the big stuff that hits me for 90% of my health? So yeah, the ugliest part of this game for me is the bosses. How they fight. That is it. It does not feel fair, and it feels like it's designed to simply kill you over and over again, not because that you really made a mistake, but because the boss will literally not give you an opening. And sure, I mean, you can argue up and down that every move can be dodged and avoided in some way by jumping or rolling or going in just the right direction or whatever, just right. And sure, I'm sure it can. And maybe, for someone that's doing like a level 1 challenge run playthrough of the game where they have to do everything frame perfect, sure. But on a regular playthrough, when you've taken the time to level up, you've taken the time to upgrade all your gear, you've taken the time to optimize your setup for the boss, you've applied all your buffs and your spells, you dodge and avoid the majority of what they throw at you. So I feel like at that point, you've really paid your dues to be able to contend very well with the boss. And maybe you won't one-shot it, kind of as you're learning the attack patterns, but you've got a good chance. You're set up for a good chance of success. So, if you've made it to the end of my ramblings, just one more thing I gotta say, though, before you go. Get good. I just wanted to kind of try and beat you to it. Overall, I mean, I liked the DLC. I give it an 8 out of 10. But those are my thoughts. Let me know what yours are down below, and I'll see you guys all in the next video.